Most men lead lives of quiet desperation. Henry David Thoreau wrote those words in 1846 when he lived on the shores of Walden Pond. Now, I don't know where Thoreau collected his data, but I do know that his words are true today. There is a disengagement crisis in organizations. If you look deeply into the everyday lives of people at work, as I did, you'll find that far too many are quietly disengaged from what they do, and their performance is suffering as a result. We cannot solve our economic crisis unless we solve this problem. Job satisfaction is at a low point in the U.S. across the spectrum of workers in all ages and income levels. Employee dissatisfaction leads to slower revenue growth and lower profitability. In other words, employee engagement drives the bottom line. People cannot do their best work if they are disengaged. The cost of disengagement is staggering, estimated at $300 billion annually in the U.S. alone. It doesn't have to be this way. Work should ennoble, not kill the human spirit. There's hope and opportunity in this crisis because it forces us to fundamentally reevaluate how we operate. My research shows that although most don't realize it, managers have the power to re-energize the workforce and revitalize creative productivity. So, I'm a psychologist. Unfortunately for you, I'm not the kind who can cure any neuroses you brought with you today, but I am the kind who researches psychological experience and performance. My mission is to show how we can improve everyday work life in every organization, and in the process, lift the level of organizational performance, the well-being of people across society, and even our economic condition. This mission drove me to spend the past 15 years looking deeply into the hearts and minds of people at work. Think about yourself at work. Are you as engaged as you could be? What about you? Are you? Really? Well, if you are, that's great. But think about other professionals you're close to, your spouse, son, daughter, your closest friends. My guess is that at least some of them are disengaged, unhappily stressed, or both. So what's missing? What does get people deeply and satisfyingly engaged in their work? Well, I can tell you what doesn't with a story from the diaries we collected. This is the story of a software engineer named Marcia, who worked in a team of 9 information analysts and programmers in a tech firm. This team was highly motivated and very skilled, initially motivated. Not long after we started our study, this organization announced a series of terminations with little explanation and no clarity on criteria. Engagement on this team plummeted. And when I read Marcia's diary, I had a very strong reaction. I think of myself as a rational scientist, but her diary, the day the termination started, moved me to tears. It is very hard to work and get anything done around here today. 39 people lost their jobs, and it seems like this is just the beginning. They will get rid of people from the project manager's level next, and then they will move on to us. I feel like an abused spouse that will not leave the abuser. I keep giving them another chance, and they keep socking us in the face. This and the other 12,000 diaries revealed inner work life. and that is the usually hidden emotions, perceptions, and motivations that people experience as they react to and try to make sense of the events in their workday. Inner work life is essentially moment-to-moment employee engagement, and it strongly influences creativity and productivity. In other words, inner work life drives performance. People cannot do their best work if they have poor inner work lives. Now, bad inner work life doesn't have to stay that way. In fact, it fluctuates all the time as a function of the events going on at work. Even on Marcia's team, people did have some great days. Listen to this one. This is from a fellow programmer of Marcia's named Tom. He had been working to solve a problem, fix a bug in some software he was creating. I smashed that bug that's been frustrating me for almost a calendar week. That may not be an event to you, but I live a very drab life, so I'm all hyped. No one really knows about it. 3 of the team members who would be involved are out today, so I have to sit here rejoicing in my solitary smugness. Tom's diary reveals our main discovery from analyzing 64,000 specific events that people reported in these diaries. We call the discovery the progress principle. Of all the events that can deeply engage people in their work, the single most important is simply making progress on meaningful work. Progress can lift inner work life, even if it seems like just a small step forward, like Tom smashing that bug in his program, what you might call a small win. When we analyze people's very best inner work life days, we found that the single most prominent event was making progress. And when we analyzed the worst days, the single most prominent event was setbacks in the work, that is, being stalled or blocked or feeling like you're moving backward in what you're doing. That's the dark side of the progress principle. Let me tell you about a team that was stuck on the dark side. I think of this as kind of the evil twin of the best company in our study in terms of employee engagement, because when we started the research, these 2 companies looked remarkably similar. They were both known as innovative leaders in their industry, both incredibly profitable. And yet, within 3 years of our research ending, the paths of these 2 companies had diverged wildly. The best is a company we call O'Reilly Coated Materials. They make coated fabrics for weatherproof clothing and a lot of applications known for innovation and quality around the world. The worst is a company we call Carpenter Corporation, one of the best-known consumer products brands in the world, and one of the most admired companies of the 20th century. Imagine standing with your colleagues in the parking lot of the building where you work, watching silently as the contents of that building are being auctioned off. Your computers, CADs, your workstations, your desks and telephones, your chairs. You used to be proud to work for this company because it was known for its cool, innovative products and its great work environment. But a few years ago, innovation began to fizzle. Profitability tanked. The company was acquired by a smaller rival, and now it's being completely closed down. And it's breaking your heart. That's the story of Carpenter Corporation. We studied O'Reilly and Carpenter during the same time period, and they actually used many of the same raw materials, so their economic conditions were roughly similar. Why the difference? Well, it turns out that new top management had been hired at Carpenter not long before we started our study, and by what they said and did every day, they slowly sapped work of meaning and made simple progress virtually impossible. Our research discovered that it's the everyday actions of managers and coworkers that can make the difference in catalyzing or inhibiting progress. I have an example here of an early clue we got to the kind of progress inhibitors that we would see all the time at Carpenter Corporation. This is from a longtime product engineer named Alvin. So far, every solution I've developed for this project does not meet with the cost constraints. I'm becoming very frustrated with not finding the acceptable answer. Around here, not finding a solution is perceived as not being competent. Like many others at Carpenter, Alvin had come to fear punishment for anything that looked like a mistake or a failure, and they had all become very risk-averse. Contrast that with this fairly typical diary from O'Reilly. This is a chemical engineer we call Tim. I showed the project manager the results I got and told him that there was a mistake in one of the trials. He said, "That's all right, as long as we know what we did." Everyday actions like these catalysts and inhibitors can have a huge impact on people's ability to make progress in their work. So progress is key, but it does take more to sustain great inner work life. You have to nourish the human spirit by acknowledging people's value and encouraging them when work gets difficult. Now, these actions that I call nourishers aren't all warm and fuzzy, but they do help build human connections, and they directly lift inner work life. We saw nourishers like this all the time at O'Reilly. But at Carpenter, back on the dark side, we saw toxins everywhere instead of nourishers. When I read this next diary from a Carpenter marketing specialist named Steve, I was simply stunned. During the quarterly review meeting last Saturday morning, the COO told me I had my head up my ass. So, support people and support their progress every day. None of this sounds very exotic, and yet most managers don't realize it, and most managers don't do it. When we surveyed managers around the world and asked them to rank employee motivators in terms of importance, only 5% chose progress as number one. Progress came in dead last, and we found in our research that it's shockingly difficult to identify any workplace that consistently nourishes people and catalyzes their progress. Why? Because most managers simply don't think about it. They don't understand how important it is to support people in their progress in these fundamental ways. They don't realize how important even small wins can be. We can and we must do something about all those Carpenter corporations out there, those workplaces where people are leading lives of quiet desperation. People want to succeed at meaningful work. They want to contribute. They want to matter. I believe that because working adults spend more of their waking hours at work than doing any other single activity, they deserve to be treated with dignity, and they deserve the opportunity to experience that sense of accomplishment that comes from making progress on something they care about. You can help deeply engage people in their work, whether or not you're a manager, by consistently nourishing people and catalyzing their progress. You can even help turn around an inner work life death spiral. I saw it happen dramatically, if only temporarily, even In Marcia's team, just 5 days after she said she felt like an abused spouse of the organization, and by the way, most of her teammates felt just as bad. We call this episode the Big Deal Project. It was a period of 8 days where that team worked nearly around the clock to solve a complicated problem with $145 million at stake for the company. We saw more examples of the progress principle, more catalysts and nourishers during those 8 days than we saw in some other teams the entire time that we studied them. Top managers who had previously treated the team pretty badly now cleared the decks, took away all other demands from them, stopped by to encourage them. Other groups inside the organization catalyzed that team's progress by helping out in any way they could. And people on that team had always supported each other, but now they really rallied together. One person even postponed her vacation week. And the team leader got right in there, worked alongside everyone, solving one technical problem after another, and even kept people's spirits up by doing things like singing a silly song as midnight approached on the 7th night. The result was a superb solution, delivered on time, a model of creative productivity, and a model of the way people should be supported every day. Now, you can't just turn progress support on and then turn it off again after a big deal project. That's what happened to Marcia's team. Those people were so good that they all survived those terminations. And within a year, they had all quit for better jobs. Imagine if those managers and other coworkers had supported that team every day, how much more that company would have benefited, and how much better the lives of those 9 people would have been. Imagine the transformation we can bring about in our ability to solve the problems of the future if all of us, whether we're leaders or individual contributors, create a climate of attention where everyone is looking for opportunities to support progress and nourish the people who are making it. Think, what one thing can you do tomorrow to enable someone to make progress on meaningful work? Do it. And then celebrate that progress. Make that a daily discipline, and you can bring about a world where people perform well, like those people on the Big Deal Project, and where people feel good about their work, like this programmer who said this in his diary during that golden week. The truth is, everyone is working crazy hours, doing impossible tasks, and still keeping on the cheery side of the street. God help me. I do love them so.